Prime Minister Andrew Holness has announced a 15% increase in the minimum wage effective June 1. The announcement was made on Thursday as the Prime Minister ended his contribution to the budget debate in the House of Representatives.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to announce a further increase to the minimum wage. Effective the 1st of June, the national minimum wage will increase from 13,000 per 40-hour week to 15,000, representing a 15% increase. We had also signaled last year that we intended to do away with this business of having different minimum wages for our industrial security guards and everyone else. The minimum wage for the industrial security guard will move from 14 per week to 15,000 per week, and this will take effect from June 1, 2024.
The last time the country saw an increase in its minimum wage was in March of last year. Mr. Holness told the House that an increase in the minimum wage is a necessary measure to keep those Jamaicans considered poor and vulnerable in line with inflation.
We thought about it very carefully and thought it was necessary to do to keep the working class and our poorest abreast with inflation. Madam Speaker, we have to look out for the poor and most vulnerable in the society. And you know, Madam Speaker, as we campaigned and we moved around the island, it was clear that many of our working poor were having it really difficult.
Prime Minister Holness says the government has looked at ways to financially support every sector in the country.
There is, and we must acknowledge it, certainly at the lower ends of the society in terms of the working poor, real challenges with making ends meet. So as we present this national budget, we look at how we can support every sector of the society. And I believe, Madam Speaker, that the budget presented has touched almost every sector of the society. We have touched pensioners, we have touched public sector workers, we have touched people who want to own homes, we have touched the poor, we have touched the vulnerable. Madam Speaker, we have done as best as we could without being fiscally reckless.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has announced he has announced what he's called the Jamaica 60 Hope for Children Trust Fund. The fund will be seeded by annual government contributions and is open to private donations. He says the fund will be accessible to any child born on or after Jamaica's 60th independence who is on path or who is a ward of the state.
Today, I'm pleased to announce that the government will establish the Jamaica 60 Hope for Children Trust Fund. Madam Speaker, the purpose of the fund is to help to close the wealth gap and address the issue of intergenerational poverty by creating a trust account specifically catered to vulnerable children. The Hope for Children Trust Fund will provide each eligible child with a long-term savings account funded through annual contributions from the government.
The Prime Minister says the accumulated funds will be accessible by the child on or after his or her 18th birthday for specific purposes such as education or the purchase of a home. He says the program is to provide children with a lump sum to give them a start in life upon reaching adulthood.
Madam Speaker, we will also explore alternatives to establish and manage this program. It could be part of the National Insurance Fund, or we may consider having private insurance companies administer the fund. Madam Speaker, this is, I believe, a groundbreaking initiative. To truly grapple with inequality in the society.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness. And the Prime Minister says toll-free travel on the Williamsfield to Maypen leg of the South Coast Highway will be extended until July 1.
The long-awaited Maypen to Williamsfield leg of the highway was opened in September 2023. This 27-kilometer stretch has not only slashed travel times from Maypen to Williamsfield to approximately 15 minutes, but has also ignited interest in development along its path. Trans-Jamaica Highway Limited has a right of first refusal to operate the new Maypen to Williamsfield Highway. The Trans-Jamaica Highway has exercised their right under the concession agreement by making an offer to the government of Jamaica. This offer is being evaluated by independent financial advisors and negotiations are ongoing. In order to facilitate conclusion of these negotiations, the toll period is being extended until July 1, 2024.
The Prime Minister says constituents in South St. Elizabeth will be consulted as the government finalizes plans for bypasses between Manchester and St. Elizabeth.
I noted last year that we would be moving further along the Williamsfield, Manchester to Hodges, St. Elizabeth corridor. This extension will also include a northern Mandeville bypass, a spur tree bypass, and I know a lot of people will be happy for that, a spur tree bypass, a Southfield bypass, and a Black River bypass. Value engineering exercises have been performed to reduce the project cost and at the same time increase its functionality. Madam Speaker, the residents of South St. Elizabeth will be part of the stakeholder consultation process to ensure their input is obtained and incorporated from the design stage to project delivery.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness. The Statistical Institute of Jamaica Statin says bad publicity is among the reasons preventing the completion of the 2022 Housing and Population Census. The revelation was made during an online press conference hosted by Statin's Director General, Carol Coy, on Thursday. More in this report from Abigail Bartley.
After 2 years of work, the 2022 census remains incomplete. Carol Coy today told journalists that Statin has been having trouble recruiting and retaining workers.
As unemployment rates decline, persons are less inclined to take up more strenuous and short-term jobs like data collection. A significant number of persons indicated that they were no longer interested or they found other means of employment, deemed that the work would be too hard, and some persons failed the minimum training requirement. These issues have had a cascading effect on the operations of the census, including recruitment, training, and payment delays. The Institute was able to adjust and treat most of these issues. However, the negative publicity, particularly around payment delays and the high dropout rate of census workers, have had a significant impact on the progress of data collection.
Ms. Coy says Statin has taken steps to address many of the issues, causing further delays to the census process.
All these challenges contributed to an extended data collection phase and the introduction of an abbreviated questionnaire, which we refer to as a short form, to fast-track the data collection process. It is important to note that the extended data collection and the short form will introduce certain limitations in the use of the data. Certain indicators will no longer be available at the ED or community levels. However, this is a necessary compromise as we seek to preserve the most important aspects of the census.
Opposition spokesman on finance Julian Robinson told Parliament last week that about $4 billion have so far been spent by Statin to count less than 1/3 of Jamaica's population. That issue was put to Statin's Deputy Director General, Leisha Delati Bodere.
So traditionally during a census, we don't release the preliminary count until we're finished processing the data. At this moment, we're still processing the data. What we do monitor during data collection is the coverage of the EDs and the number of EDs that we have covered. So as Ms. Coy would have said before, data collection it has been conducted in 70% of the EDs national. We are still processing and collating the information, so we would not be able to provide that number at this point in time, but it definitely will be provided once the processing of the information is complete.
Abigail Bartley for Nationwide News.
Meanwhile, angry census workers used the press briefing as a means to vent their frustration at the failure of Statin to pay them for work done over the past several months. Dana Davey has that story.
We want our money and we want it now. That's the sentiment that sums up the mood of several census workers who invaded the online space used by Statin for Thursday's virtual press conference. One woman said she has been working since November 2022 and is yet to be paid by Statin.
The communication from Statin is rather poor. Nobody responds, or when you call, the response you get really is really unprofessional. I've completed 3 zones. There are persons from these zones whose VR are approved because I'm looking on the system now that I'm speaking. No payment from starting, census takers calling every day asking about it, and you don't know what is wrong because there has been no communication. So we basically stopped collecting data from December, and there is no communication from anybody from starting. So I want to know, since I've completed these 3 zones, what about my money?
One person who claims to be a census worker said Director General Coy was not being forthright about the issues plaguing the census exercise. Another person asserted that Statin failed to give workers the proper tools to do a good job.
So, I'm a supervisor on Clarendon. However, when the census started, we were so excited to do the job. I got 7 census takers. Statin could not provide the workers for my ED.
In response, Director General Coy suggested that the payment for many workers remain unsettled due to the failure of said workers to properly complete crucial paperwork. Statin's Director of Surveys, Dr. Natalie Simpson, says work is underway to settle all outstanding payments.
We are aware that there are persons who are awaiting payment, and as Ms. Coy said earlier, we're making every effort to follow through with the process in order to ensure that persons are paid. So one of the critical things you'll be reminded our census takers and supervisors were aware of during the training and during their contracting period and onboarding is that as a requirement, the zone must be completed and the work of the persons who are assigned to you, that must be completed and approved. What we're having challenges with is, as Ms. Coy said earlier, the VR, the completion of the VR. And so we're seeing through that process in order to ensure that all our census takers and supervisors are paid.
Dana Davy for Nationwide News.
The attorney representing dancehall star Vybz Kartel, Isaac Buchanan, says he's confident his client will not have to face a retrial for his alleged role in the 2011 murder of Clive Lizard Williams. This follows last Thursday's decision by the UK-based Privy Council to quash the conviction of Kartel and his 3 co-convicts. The UK law lords ruled that the local court of appeal must determine if the matter should be set for a retrial. Shalois Michael has that story.
The Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP Paula Llewellyn, has already signaled her intention to seek a retrial against Kartel and his 3 co-accused. But, speaking during an interview on the popular online entertainment podcast The Fix on Wednesday, Kartel's attorney Isaac Buchanan says given the facts of the case, a retrial is highly unlikely.
There are several issues. So generally, you have delay. Our courts have already pronounced that 8 years is a long time. They have been locked up for 13 years. Availability of witnesses. We're talking about officers who have retired. And then what of the evidence? What about publicity?
You don't want a retrial. That's what it sounds like.
It's not going to happen.
Mr. Buchanan says the Court of Appeal may expedite its determination about Kartel's fate given his client's poor health.
This is about justice. Justice rushes, justice crushed in this situation because we start over. I figure when that letter come, there are considerations that I know in terms of the compassion of the court, and this was an expedited hearing on the grounds of his medical illness. It was granted on his medical position. So that's not stripped away simply because it's being passed back here. The court will act under the same mandate and deal with it expeditiously.
Mr. Buchanan told The Fix that Vybz Kartel has found God and is anticipating the day he'll walk out of prison as a free man.
13 years is a long time. There were times when I did visit him and I stop and the humanity, you realize that this is a lot. I say, you have to hold it. One of the proudest things I will say is that he found God. He is interacting with that faith. He was never doubtful. He always wanted his day in court. He's excited. He's looking forward to being reunited with his family. Same for the other 3 co-accused.
Shalois Michael for Nationwide News.
Founder of No, let's go to international news now. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel ahead of a UN vote on a U.S. draft resolution which supports calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza tied to the release of hostages held by Hamas. It's the first time the U.S. has supported calls for the ceasefire in the region, which previously blocked such demands at the United Nations. Mr. Blinken is meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the United States grows more critical of Israel's military campaign. The U.S. Secretary of State has been in the Middle East to discuss a post-war plan to govern and secure Gaza. A UN-backed food security assessment this week said 1.1 million people in Gaza were struggling with catastrophic hunger and starvation. Almost 2 million people, most of Gaza's population, are reported to have fled their homes from the fighting.